The boardroom of Titan Global was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the quiet tapping of manicured fingers against a glass table worth more than most people's homes. At the head of the table sat CEO Victor Harrington. Sharp suit, sharper tongue, and a reputation for humiliating anyone who didn't meet his impossible standards. Across from him stood Daniel Reyes, a single father wearing a modest navy blazer that had seen better days. He wasn't supposed to be there. He was just a backup cultural liaison, brought in at the last minute for a billion-dollar international merger between Titan Global and a powerful European-Asian consortium. Victor barely glanced at Daniel before smirking. "You?" he said, leaning back in his leather chair. "You're our last-minute solution? I asked for a global strategist, not someone who looks like he just left a PDA meeting." A few executives chuckled quietly. Daniel didn't react. He had learned long ago that silence was stronger than ego. Ever since his wife passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their 7-year-old daughter Sophia alone, he had faced far worse than mockery. He had worked nights as a translator, mornings as a consultant, and afternoons helping Sophia with her homework. Sleep was a luxury. Pride was irrelevant. Survival was everything. What Victor didn't know was that Daniel spoke 9 languages fluently: English, Spanish, Mandarin, Japanese, German, French, Arabic, Russian, and Portuguese. Not because he chased prestige, but because he once promised his wife they would travel the world together. When she got sick, he stayed home. When she passed, he kept learning languages at night while Sophia slept, whispering foreign vocabulary into the darkness like prayers. Today's deal was critical. Titan Global was negotiating with a powerful multinational delegation representing investors from Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. The contract value? $1 billion. If it failed, Titan stock would plummet. The doors opened. The delegation entered. First came Mr. Liang from Beijing, then Ms. Nakamura from Tokyo, followed by Herr Vogel from Berlin, Monsieur Laurent from Paris, Sheikh Al-Farouk from Dubai, and representatives from Moscow and Sao Paulo. The room filled with accents, tailored suits, and quiet power. Victor stood confidently. "Welcome to Titan Global." He began in English, assuming translators would do the rest. But something felt off. Mr. Liang whispered something in Mandarin to Ms. Nakamura. Herr Vogel frowned slightly at a translation error. Sheikh Al-Farouk exchanged a look with his advisor. The energy shifted subtly, like a thread beginning to unravel. Victor continued speaking, unaware that small cultural missteps were stacking up like invisible dominoes. He mispronounced names. He interrupted pauses that were meant as respectful silence in Japanese business etiquette. He joked casually about negotiation tactics that, in German culture, sounded unserious. Then came the turning point. A clause in the draft contract contained a phrase that, when translated into Mandarin, implied temporary cooperation instead of long-term strategic alliance. Mr. Liang's expression hardened. He began speaking rapidly in Mandarin to his team. Victor blinked. "What's happening?" The hired translator hesitated. Sweat formed on his forehead. "Sir, they believe the contract implies non-commitment." Victor's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous." The room was slipping. That's when Daniel quietly stepped forward. "May I?" he asked calmly. Victor scoffed. "Unless you've suddenly become fluent in Mandarin." Daniel turned toward Mr. Liang and responded in flawless Mandarin. The room froze. Mr. Liang's eyes widened. Daniel explained the clause carefully, clarifying intent, restructuring the phrasing respectfully, even referencing a Chinese proverb about partnerships being like planting trees whose shade you may never sit under. The tension eased. Then Ms. Nakamura asked a question, in Japanese. Daniel answered smoothly. He adjusted his tone, softened his eye contact in accordance with Japanese etiquette, and acknowledged hierarchy correctly. Her Vogel interjected in German. Daniel replied in precise, formal German, citing regulatory frameworks that impressed even the legal team. One by one, the delegates tested him. French, Arabic, Russian, Portuguese. Each time, Daniel responded without hesitation, not just translating words, but translating culture, nuance, and respect. Victor sat frozen. The executives who had laughed earlier now stared in disbelief. The meeting transformed. Instead of tension, there was connection. Instead of confusion, clarity. Instead of ego, understanding. Hours later, the delegation leader stood. "We came prepared to walk away," Monsieur Laurent admitted in English. "But today we witnessed something rare. Respect. Seik al farouk nadid. Trust is built when you speak a man's language, not just with words, but with honor." The contract was signed. $1 billion secured. As the delegation exited, Mr. Liang paused in front of Daniel. In Mandarin, he said quietly, "Your daughter will be proud of you." Daniel smiled softly. "She already is." Victor approached slowly. "You never mentioned you spoke 9 languages," he muttered. Daniel adjusted his sleeve. "You never asked." And for the first time in years, Victor Harrington had no comeback. But the story wasn't over, because saving the deal was only the beginning. The next morning, Titan Global's stock soared. Headlines praised Victor Harrington as a genius negotiator. Interviews were scheduled. Investors were celebrating. Daniel? He was back at home at 6 a.m., packing Sophia's lunch. "Did you win your big meeting, Daddy?" she asked while tying her shoelaces. He smiled. "We did." She grinned. "See? I told you your superpower languages would help." He laughed. To her, it was simple. To the world, it was extraordinary. Back at Titan Global, the board demanded answers. "Who is Daniel Reyes?" one director asked. "Why is he not leading our international strategy division?" Victor felt something unfamiliar, humility. He reviewed Daniel's file. No Ivy League degree. No flashy executive titles. Just years of contract work, cultural consulting, and translation services. Widower. Single father. Victor requested a private meeting. When Daniel entered, Victor stood, this time without mockery. "Why are you working as a backup consultant when you could run global operations anywhere?" Victor asked. Daniel hesitated. "Because most companies don't promote men who leave early for school pickups." Silence. "My daughter lost her mother," Daniel continued. "She won't lose her father to a boardroom." The words hit harder than any business statistic. Victor leaned back, reflecting. He had built an empire but lost 2 marriages in the process. "You saved this company," Victor said quietly, "and I almost dismissed you because of a blazer and a job title." Daniel shrugged. "Happens often." 3 days later, Titan Global announced a new position, Director of Global Strategic Relations. The role came with flexible hours, and Daniel Reyes's name on the door. But the most powerful moment came weeks later. At a global press conference, Victor stood before cameras and investors. "I want to introduce the man who truly secured our billion-dollar partnership," he said. Gasps filled the room as Daniel walked onto the stage. Victor continued, "Leadership isn't about volume. It's about value. And sometimes, the quietest voice in the room speaks the most languages." The applause was thunderous. That night, Daniel returned home to Sophia. She held up a handmade sign. "My daddy equals 9 languages plus 1 big heart." He knelt down and hugged her tightly. The world finally saw what she always knew. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Because sometimes the person you mock today We'll save your empire tomorrow. The applause from the press conference hadn't even faded before the backlash began. Success attracts attention, and attention attracts enemies. 3 weeks after the billion-dollar deal was signed, Titan Global received an unexpected notice. The European-Asian Consortium had paused the second phase of investment, another $600 million tranche, pending a compliance review. Victor Harrington exploded in his office. This is impossible. We delivered everything. But Daniel didn't react with anger. He reacted with intuition. Something changed, he said calmly. Not the contract, the perception. Victor frowned. Perception? Daniel nodded. Trust isn't signed once. It's maintained daily. An emergency video conference was scheduled with key international stakeholders. But this time the tone was colder. Herr Vogel from Berlin spoke first, in German. His tone was formal. Too formal. Daniel responded in equally precise German, but Vogel didn't soften. Then Ms. Nakamura spoke in Japanese. Her wording was indirect, layered. To most, it would sound polite, but Daniel heard what wasn't being said. In Japanese corporate culture, direct confrontation is rare. Concerns are implied, not declared. There had been a rumor. A competitor had quietly suggested that Titan Global planned to shift manufacturing overseas after securing funds, cutting local jobs in Europe and Asia to increase profit margins. It wasn't true, but in international business, truth matters less than trust. Victor started defending aggressively in English. Daniel gently placed a hand over the microphone button. Let me. He switched to Mandarin, then Arabic, then French. Not defending, not arguing, listening. He acknowledged historical sensitivities, Germany's labor protection values, Japan's emphasis on loyalty, China's importance of long-term stability, Middle Eastern principles of honor in partnership. Then he did something unexpected. He invited them to visit Titan's facilities, unannounced. Full transparency. But that wasn't the masterstroke. The masterstroke came when Daniel shared something personal. In Russian, he said quietly, "When my wife passed away, I learned something. Stability is not promised. It is protected. I would never protect my daughter's future by destroying another family's." Silence. Then Sheikh Al-Farouk spoke in Arabic. "You speak like a father, not a negotiator." Daniel replied, "Because I am one." The call ended without a final decision. Victor paced. That was risky, too personal. Daniel looked out the window. Human connection is never risky. Days passed. Markets fluctuated. News outlets speculated. Then, one morning, Titan Global's lobby filled with unexpected visitors. The entire delegation had arrived. In person. Factory inspections began immediately. Workers were interviewed. Financials reviewed. Supply chains examined. Daniel walked beside them, answering questions in 9 languages without notes, without ego. At one point, Mr. Liang pulled him aside. "Why did you stay loyal to this company after being mocked?" he asked in Mandarin. Daniel smiled faintly. "Because leadership is learned, and sometimes people deserve a second chance." That answer would matter later. After 2 intense days, the delegation requested one final closed-door meeting. Victor sat silently this time. Mr. Liang stood. "We tested your numbers," he said in English. Herr Vogel continued. "We tested your infrastructure." Ms. Nakamura added softly, "We tested your character." Sheikh Al-Farouk looked directly at Daniel. "And we tested your heart." A pause that felt eternal. Then, "The second phase investment will proceed." Relief flooded the room. But that wasn't all. Monsieur Laurent slid another document across the table. "We are expanding the partnership," he said, An additional $400 million for joint innovation centers. But under one condition. Victor stiffened. Name it. The delegation spoke almost in unison. We want Daniel Reyes to oversee all global cultural and strategic integration. Victor didn't hesitate this time. It would be an honor. Daniel blinked. That would require relocation, international travel, extended hours. Mr. Liang smiled knowingly. We anticipated that. He slid forward a second page. It outlined a hybrid leadership structure. Regional directors reporting to Daniel remotely, flexible travel scheduling, and international education sponsorship benefits. For Sophia, Ms. Nakamura said gently. Daniel's throat tightened. They had listened, not just to his words, to his priorities. Weeks later, Titan Global launched a new division, Global Unity Initiative. Under Daniel's leadership, the company didn't just expand profits. It expanded perspective. Employee satisfaction rose worldwide. Cross-border collaboration improved. Turnover dropped. But the most powerful moment came months later at Titan's annual global summit. Victor stepped onto the stage. I built this company on ambition, he said, but I nearly lost it to arrogance. He turned toward Daniel. This man taught me that intelligence impresses people, but empathy earns them. Standing ovation. That night, Daniel returned home earlier than expected. Sophia was working on a school project titled, My Hero. She looked up. Daddy, how many languages do you speak now? He smiled. 9. She tilted her head. I think you forgot one. Oh, the language of being kind. Daniel felt tears rise. Maybe she was right, because in the end, it wasn't Mandarin, German, Arabic, or Japanese that saved the billion-dollar deal. It was respect. It was humility. It was heart. And sometimes, the most powerful language in the world is the one spoken without words. If you'd like, I can now create